Courage does not have to be you grabbing a megaphone and starting a rally. Courage doesn't mean being a reporter and digging for stories. Courage for me can be having a conversation with your child. I can't tell you how many adults, parents of young children came up to me during this period of time and continue to do it and say, how do I have this conversation? Your vulnerability is your strength. I know you've heard this before, but I am a firm believer in it. And that takes courage too. I was not comfortable necessarily talking about my past and how I grew up when I first started being on TV, but I realized that it helps set you apart. It also helps people relate and wants to make others share stories about their own challenges.
Oh, I love this so much. A few years ago, I remember being at a anti-Asian hate rally based out of Vancouver because I was speaking. I was invited as a speaker sharing, my story about what I had run into. And it was a really chaotic day. There was people on the street. We were walking down. We were all dressed in white. And I get a phone call from my mom who asks me, "What are you doing today?" And I said, "Well, Mom, I'm speaking at an anti-Asian hate rally in Vancouver downtown." And her first question was, "Why?" This happened at the midst of COVID, when we were getting hit with stories about people who were getting attacked, our grandfathers, our aunties, people who looked just like us getting attacked. And I couldn't understand why it was that my mom's first reaction was, "Why are you there bringing trouble?" And this silence is what we're going to talk about today. I am incredibly privileged that today we get to invite the author of a book that I think is going to change so many people's minds. And I think it's so important that we get to read this. Now, before we dive in here, if you're new here, welcome back to the show. If you've been here, welcome back to the show. If you're new here, welcome to Big Asian Energy, where each week we host deep dive conversations with Asian American leaders, change makers, and a few troublemakers who are redefining who we are. As always, if there's something here that you found today that is helpful or inspirational from our guests, please share it with somebody you care about, because as I often say on the show, when we rise together. Now, today, I want to do a quick introduction because today we're talking to Dion Lim. And if you haven't heard of her, she is a two-time Emmy Award-winning journalist and the first Asian American woman to anchor primary weekday newscasts in 3 major American markets. As a reporter at ABC 7 News in San Francisco, she became the defining national voice on anti-Asian hate during COVID, her reporting reaching millions of people through Good Morning America, Nightline, 2020, and help earn her I think very much deserved Gold House A100 designation as one of the most impactful Asian Americans in the country. As a matter of fact, as we joke about it, we're talking about is that San Francisco actually there's a Dion Lim Day that was celebrated in San Francisco when she stepped away from her 20-year broadcast career specifically to talk about publishing her new book. So first and foremost, welcome to the show, Dion. It's amazing to have you.
Oh my gosh, it's an honor. It is a privilege. And yeah, I think I fall into the troublemaker category. Yes.
I love it. I love troublemakers. So can we just dive in here? So in your own words, what will people get from reading this powerful new book that you wrote?
This book for me is making sure it's an insurance policy that not just America remembers our history, but that the world remembers our history. I want people to understand that Asian Americans are part of the fabric of our country, of our nation, of this world, and that we are not silent like so many of us are conditioned to believe and others believe because of the model minority myth. So we are here, we are loud, we are in charge, and we are showing our big Asian energy.
Oh, I love that so much. The way you
It's good branding. It's great.
Oh. Okay. So, this is a really powerful thing because you talk about something that I think our community sometimes have a hard time talking about, which is the structural issues and sometimes the racism that we hate, that we face as Asian Americans. So, first and foremost, when you were writing this book, did you have somebody in mind? Like, who were you writing this for? Is it just for the community or someone in particular?
To be honest, it was a way for me to mentally decompress and to, in some ways, not just relive it, but also find some comfort from a mental health perspective. Because it was cathartic going back and thinking about my process and how we were able to get to this point of reporting on things that had never really been reported on before in the volume that they were. I had not yet had my son. I have an almost 3-year-old little boy at home. And if I were to answer that question, I would say that this book is for him. This book is for the young people and the next generation. So that way we don't have moms who say, why when you want to go participate at a rally? Because my own mom told me at the height of the pandemic to stop reporting that it's making Asian Americans look bad. And we have to retrain our brains and train the next generation to realize, yes, we are supposed to be speaking out and making waves. That's the only way to change.
Absolutely. And I I related to that, the part that you wrote about in the book where your mom was sharing that. My first thought when I was reading that was like, I could understand, like I could resonate with, I feel like there's a large audience of Asian Americans who automatically are hesitant to share anything that casts Asian Americans in a negative light. And I think it comes down to perhaps the sense of survival, or like the sense of like, oh, this is what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to bury it down inside. Is this something that, you felt as well when you were going through this process?
Completely. And it also dug up a lot of these deep-rooted things in my past, in my childhood, that I had almost forgotten about, maybe pushed to the side. I remember my mother had tripped in a parking lot and really hurt her ankle and just didn't want to cause a problem for anybody at the supermarket. And I thought to myself, well, you should prevent it from happening again to someone else. And her reasoning was that it would be too much of a burden to bother the people of the shopping center with her problem. It's like very backwards, but I kind of do understand this, right? Because there were supermarkets who probably would not hire her because her English language skills were not good. And so many things that I don't even know about because my parents don't want to talk about their journey and their lives when they came to America beforehand. So it's complicated, man. It is really challenging.
It is so complicated. There's a I'm Taiwanese, and I think that I read that your background is also Taiwanese and Hong Kong, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
And there's a saying in Taiwan which basically is like, don't go and inconvenience like other people, like don't be a bother, don't get inconvenienced. And I feel like there's a deeper sense that I grew up with where it's like pointing out problems or speaking on negative things automatically is it's a cultural sin. Like we don't do it because the way that we're supposed to show up is kind of like we bury our own suffering, right?
Yes.
Like there's this cultural essence. Did you ever feel like this, or like did you feel people around you were thinking like this?
Oh my God. 1,000,000%. And John, I wish you had told me this story at 2020 during that time period, because it would have made so much more sense. And I would have had a lot more calm and peace and understanding versus me struggling to figure out, why on earth are you telling me to stop my career and stop talking about something that matters to us, matters to me, your own daughter.
Yeah.
And I think about when my dad, I remember he was on a business trip and he was passing through. I was at the time working as a news anchor in Charlotte, North Carolina. I hadn't seen my parents in about a year. He was on a 12-hour layover and I had to find out from my brother. And I thought, you're in town. I haven't seen you for a year, but why don't you want to hang out? And it's not because he doesn't love me. It's not because our parents don't care. It's because of the inconvenience factor. He said, oh, well, I know you're busy. And I'm like, Dad, I'll make time for you. And I think about those times, like, why should they have to suffer when they could easily ask me a question like, hey, what are you doing? Are you available? Yeah, I think about it all the time.
Yeah, it is such a deeply embedded part of how we relate to one another. Now, take me back to that time in 2020. You had gotten a anonymous Instagram DM with a video of an elderly man being beaten in Bayview. You specifically saw that, and that was something you decided to talk about as a journalist. What was it that made you decide, this is something that needs to be brought to the national level?
To tee up the response to that, I need to tell everybody that prior to this DM, I was mostly known for telling lifestyle type stories, entertainment news, right? I had just come off of following the Golden State Warriors on their championship runs to Cleveland and Toronto. I had just covered the Oscars. So this was a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I mean, yes, as a journalist, you are pretty well-rounded. You cover everything, but I was not known for crime. There was always a crime beat somebody in the newsroom. So I remember very distinctively searching online, is there a story that I can pitch for the morning meeting? I have no clue what to do. And when I saw that video, there was a visceral response. I first didn't understand what was happening. Is this real? Could this be possible? This is fake. And you know how social media goes. It's on an endless loop. So I'm watching it over and over and over again. And it probably took 7 or 8 times before I realized, holy crap, that's not my dad. That's somebody who looks like my dad. And he's being beaten because he's collecting cans, trying to probably make some, oh, I'm so sorry about that, trying to make some money for his family, and being barked at, called racial slurs. It was disgusting. And I had never seen it in such graphic, up close detail before. There was a visceral reaction of almost feeling numb. And at that moment, I knew what I needed to do. And it was almost like a calling, like all of those years of storytelling, I needed to find him. And I pitched my heart out that day. And I knew that if I didn't get to tell this story, more people would get hurt. And that was the fire that built within me in that moment.
Thank you so much, by the way. I on a personal level, just, not even as a host of the show, I remember watching those reports, and yours was probably one of them. And I remember thinking how brave it is that people are speaking up about this, because we do have that culture. And I think that we do still live in a world that basically says if you're Asian, you're supposed to be rich, successful, and you're doing well. So as a result, if something happens to you, just suck it up. You're not doing as poorly as other people. And I feel like there's this undercurrent, even today, that there's a little bit of this, well, we shouldn't be speaking up about, these smaller things, what we now deem as smaller things. When you were coming out to talk about this, what was going on in your system? Like, I would feel super exposed. I still do sometimes when I'm on stage and talking about this.
I'm sure.
Yeah. What did you feel, and how did you deal with that?
I felt uneasy. Don't get me wrong. I think we have conditioned ourselves to be tough because we can swallow a lot and handle a lot. So I didn't want it to get to me. And it wasn't until later in the pandemic I realized, oh, I've been harboring all of this trauma within, and eventually it's going to come out. But during that time, I felt a tremendous sense of unease because am I really qualified to do this? At the time, I had been in the industry for a good amount of time. I was probably considered rather veteran and senior.
Absolutely.
I knew how to tell stories, but I had to do this one justice. I had to try my hardest. And there's no playbook on how to cover anti-Asian hate and racism. You don't learn about it in school. And by all means, when you are in your career, you don't think, okay, I'm just going to be the racism reporter. That is not a thing. So what do I do? And at the end of the day, I realized it is a fundamental feeling and perspective that I needed to capture of how the victim is feeling. It is very victim driven because those are the people who really are going to bring the emotion and elicit a response and activate the community that this is wrong. So uncomfortable. And also I knew that I would be attacked in different ways and criticized for the work that I was doing, but I was ready to take that risk because our community was at risk.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for sharing that. Do you mind sharing a little bit more of the way that you used the word attack? What was the responses like after you started speaking out about this publicly?
I mean, it was crazy. I thought I was pretty successful professionally up until that point, but to get Instagram messages, to get in from all sides. I mean, we had celebrities reach out saying thank you. I really resonate with the storytelling that you're doing. But on the other hand, I had people telling me that I needed to go back to China because this was during the era of the rhetoric, right? Of a certain somebody saying that the Kung flu caused COVID and along with it, Asian Americans. And also what is crazy, sometimes the hate would be toward people who were Korean or people who were not even Asian, but very ignorant people who just assumed that anyone who looked not white was the cause of this pandemic. So I just recall that people were telling me to die. People were saying, this is not real. This is overinflated. People who believed that it was Kung flu would call me a liar, digs on credibility. I remember there was a security investigation because there were people who were saying that they were going to, kill me or knock me down in the street. And it was shocking. And then other Asians sometimes too.
Oh.
There were Asian Americans who were of, I don't even know how you call them, but they didn't believe that this Asian hate was real because that it was manufactured. I don't know these conspiracy theorists, but that was what hurt the most, is knowing that our community could not get on the same page and realize that we are all in this together. They made it a political thing, and that was exceptionally eye-opening and heartbreaking.
Yeah. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I mean, excuse my French, but Jesus fucking Christ, what were those people thinking?
I know.
Seriously.
I know. Truly. Maybe because you're like at your home and locked down and have nothing else to do. Like, seriously. But I remember carrying pens in my pocket even, thinking if I was going to be attacked, at least I had something sharp.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that nothing physically happened. After that time period in which you had, reported about this, I'm curious, like, did your reporting and did your champion of this issue, did that affect your career? Did it affect your did it follow you in any way? Because I think that's something that a lot of people are concerned about.
It changed everything. And I went through a little bit of an identity crisis myself, because imagine having your work amplified for the entire world. I remember there was one month I looked at my Twitter impressions and it was close to 16 million people. And I thought I'd never reached that level before, but I felt so much guilt too, because at whose expense was my career taking off? The notoriety, the recognition. I was asked to be on national news programs. I made international headlines. People were quoting me left and right. And I thought, as successful as this feels and how much I want to celebrate, I couldn't, because at the same time, there was so much violence still to deal with. So that was a push and pull. And then also coming down from it after the pandemic, wanting to still champion these stories, but the world had moved on. It felt like people's attention spans were waning, and I constantly was getting bombarded with messages saying, I can't watch these graphic videos anymore. It's too much.
Right.
And also changes in the DEI space where people just didn't want to talk about it. So it was a number of things, and navigating that has been difficult. And again, no playbook. You just have to forge your own path and figure out, how do you want to present yourself to the world now that this is not necessarily your everyday. And I'm actually glad that it's not. I'm glad that it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that we're no longer hearing about these types of cases. Although my fear is that they're still happening, but we're just that the media has kind of lost interest in framing it that way, and that's really my concern. I'm curious. We're when you went through it, that was during the time of COVID. We're now 2026. Similar leaders, but different political situations.
Yes.
And I'm curious, do you feel like the anti-Asian hate or like the fight for Asian America has shifted, changed, or what is your current read of this?
Oh, gosh, so complicated. I get asked this question all the time because statistically, and I'm always skeptical of stats, especially crime ones, because they can be manipulated so easily.
Yeah.
I will say this. Anecdotally, there is certainly less violence physically, but with the attacks on immigration, with some of the tensions with China, and just an overall, I guess, with this prejudice toward Asian Americans, it's manifesting in different ways, right? It is the discussion about education. Do we really need algebra in schools? Even though that is one of the pillars of what Asian Americans find valuable in our communities. I know, I don't know if it's like this for you where you are at, but it is a little backwards. It is a little backwards. Or getting rid of Cantonese class in a city where you have a third population of Asian Americans. How does that make any sense? So to me, those are also biases that are coming out, and it's veiled in a different format. It is not the same as thwacking somebody over the head or setting their business on fire, but it is equally as detrimental. It's just in a different way, and it's harder to capture people's attention on those issues. So that's the challenge we're facing right now. And I would never wish it upon anybody else, but look at the Jewish community. They're experiencing extreme prejudice and anti-Semitism right now. So a lot of different groups are experiencing it. So it's not just Asian Americans. So I guess people's attention spans they can only handle so much.
100%. And I understand that. I think this is, this is something that when you brought up, there was a sense of like, okay, we've seen a lot of this. It's a little much. Like my own nervous system can't handle it. I understand that. And it's understanding. And I feel like there's a narrative that I hear a lot when I share about this, which is I don't want to be seen as a victim. And my perspective has always been, well, you're not being a victim when you talk about it. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. You are actually championing for change. If you're walking down the street and you see somebody getting attacked and you call it out, you're not a victim. You're trying to make a structural change. And that takes so much courage. I have a question around this, which is, I hear a lot from people who quietly say to me, they're like, okay, I actually do experience this kind of stuff in my workplace, but I don't want to be that person. Right? I experience microaggressions. My boss said this to me. I found this group chat where I sound, like things that you just would feel so sad to hear about, like private group chats where people were sharing pictures with like the writings on. But there's a general feeling of, I'm the only Asian person in this group. And I don't know, should I speak out about it? How would you talk to somebody who is in that position?
I lived that position in different settings, not just in the editorial room, but I get it. It's scary. Your job is on the line, your family's welfare, your paycheck, all of that. Why would you want to speak out? But fundamentally in your heart, you know it's the right thing to do. I say this. The word allyship was thrown around so much during the pandemic, and so much so that I don't know if people truly understand the meaning of it. But I found the strength in numbers coming from different forms, like different ways, because I remember, to me, the most valuable people around me were those who did not look like me, but I would be able to talk to and feel comfortable with before those discussions had to happen and say, hey, this makes me feel uneasy. Do you think everybody else knows? Posing it as a question, maybe as an education, but also in a non-confrontational way, which is really hard, as a fine line. I mean, I'm pretty bold in my messaging as a journalist. I have no problem like shoving a microphone in your face, right? Asking you something very inappropriate. but in like a corporate setting, you do have to phrase things differently. I don't know if Oriental is really the way you would describe people. Maybe a rug, right? It's true story. In one of my dealings, along my career, I did have to explain that. Yeah.
Really?
So
get out.
Yeah.
No.
My favorite was when I was in Kansas. People would call me out on the street and wave and say, it's Connie Chung. It's Connie Chung. Okay. Bless you for even knowing who Connie Chung is, because there are a lot of like young people who look at me like deer in the headlights. But it was like, how do I respond to something like that? They're probably just unaware that you can't be calling me Connie Chung. So I'd be like, do I look the same age? Things like that. Like having a good zinger sometimes is a way to deal with it. And honestly, I've heard it all. So that's why I choose to deal with it in a very easy to understand way that people can digest. Because if you start going into this lecture and be very confrontational, it does not rub people the right way.
Yeah, people.
And then you become the angry Asian woman.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. People kind of glaze over and they just go, oh no, like now I gotta like walk on eggshells. But I love that way of like adding a zinger or like turning it around, like using a question to kind of point it out to them. I always love dropping this thing, which is if you encounter somebody making a joke, and I
Yeah.
hear this so often, it's like, oh, it's just a joke. Oh, like I came across this today. Oh, and wouldn't you, I was in traffic and somebody did this, and wouldn't you know it, it's an Asian woman. And then they go, oh, it's just a joke. I always suggest to people, ask, what's the joke?
Oh, that's good.
Can you explain the joke? I don't get the joke. What's funny about it? Because
that's good.
it forces them to have to look at it, right? Because they got to go, oh, well, and then they kind of stutter around and they get mad, and you kind of just be like, well, I'm just curious. Why is it a joke?
Oh my God, that's so good. Or along the same vein, if people are making a comment about crazy rich Asians, because apparently we're all crazy rich,
Well,
right?
It's going to or the text.
Hello.
Yeah. I would like a Singaporean mention, please. Thank you.
Just so funny.
Yeah.
So funny. But it's like, but I actually need to find the stat, but there are a tremendous amount of Asian Americans who are in poverty in many communities. So being able to sass them back with an actual stat, this is what I've always said, is that stats actually give you some ammunition. Granted, take them with a grain of salt, but when you're on the end of educating someone, even the most hard-nosed believers of one thing can't deny the numbers.
Yeah.
Just saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of times I feel like then the response becomes like, oh, I didn't know that. And I think that it is an educational thing. I mean, you'd be shocked at how often, I would still talk about the term bamboo ceiling or model minority, and how many people even within our community are still like, wait, what was that? Or they think that model minority is a good thing. They're like, oh, that's a good thing, right? We're models. It's like, well, it's different meaning, but let's explore a little bit. Is that educational, that teachable moment that we get to have? That's the change, right? Hey, I just wanted to let you know that Big Asian Energy is officially out, and you can go and pick it up anywhere you buy books, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, etc. If you've ever felt like there's something stopping you from reaching your full potential, if you've ever felt like you want to have that unstoppable charisma and confidence in the work that you do, as well as just the way you show up in life, this might be the book for you. It is a book that is jam-packed with research studies, advice, case studies, stories, and of course, so many different techniques and takeaways, including communication, as well as mindset, as well as confidence, and all the other topics out there. It just won one of the best books of 2025 on Amazon. So if you haven't checked it out yet, go take a look. And finally, if you have a few seconds, can I also ask you to leave a quick review for Big Asian Energy? It not only means the world to us to hear from you, but more importantly, it does absolutely help us in reaching more audiences. I hope you're having an amazing day, and thanks again. Okay. There's a moment I wanted to really ask you about. There's an important story about an 84-year-old man who was knocked in the ground. You know the story I'm talking about. Actually, you're the pro at this. Would you like to set that up a little bit of what happened?
Sure. Gosh, it was at the beginning of the pandemic. An 84-year-old man named Visha Ratanapakdi, an immigrant from Thailand, was knocked to the ground in the Anza Vista neighborhood of San Francisco. He was on his morning walk, very innocuous, not bothering anyone, tiny-looking guy wearing a face mask and covering, minding his own business. I had gotten wind of the story, and I had already covered a number of high-profile cases, but never any that result in someone's death. Yeah. And also, I knew there was surveillance video of it, and I knew that getting that video would elicit the outrage that was needed to get the attention for this story. So it was so complicated. I went door to door. I think it was on my day off, seeing if anybody had anything. Most people closed their doors and didn't want to help because, look, I get it, right? Journalists, scary. Do you trust me? Especially if you're old school, you don't know, who am I? Things like that. But eventually, I not only had a source, and this source, God bless her, was a woman in law enforcement and also in the LGBTQ plus community. So not Asian American. And she just said, I want to help you. out of the blue. I got to know her. And when this case broke, she said, come to this destination. It was the middle of the night, I think, or very late. I ran out of the building and I met her on the side of the street. I didn't even know how to transfer the video, so I recorded it off of her screen, and I literally, as fast as I could, got back to the TV station because I knew what I had in my hands was going to be powerful. Now, I will say there are going to be people who say, oh, well, that's exploiting this situation. And I thought about that too, not for the sake of clicks and likes. It was the sake of getting people to care about this so the story could continue on. And when I coupled that video, it got shared like wildfire. And then subsequently, I tracked down his daughter, Montanas Ratanapakdi. She did not want to go on camera. She was very hesitant about speaking out. But ultimately, we got comfortable with each other, and she told me everything. And that is the case that opened the door to the Stop Anti-Asian Hate movement, and so many organizations, grassroots ones, that popped up because it resonated so much to see someone in that position so callously pushed to the ground. Later, I also unearthed documents, thanks to other sources, that showed that the perpetrator had gone back to his car, grabbed a cell phone, and then took pictures of his lifeless body. Yeah.
Oh my God.
It was unbelievable. Unbelievable. And in a timely turn of events, I don't know if you saw this, but the perpetrator who, yes, definitely did the crime is not going to serve any jail time.
Yeah. That was something I wanted to ask about, was that in the end, he got involuntary manslaughter. And I believe you were there at the verdict, right?
Yeah.
What was that like? Like, what was going through you in that moment? I mean, you saw the full range of this. I mean, to have a killer essentially even to go as far as to take pictures of that. Like, there was no question that there was that violence that would happen. What was going through your mind when you were there?
Terrible injustice.
Yeah.
I remember I actually missed the verdict because it's kind of hard to time when it's going to come back, but my phone blew up. I mean, it was everybody under the sun telling me, people who were in the courtroom, people who were behind the scenes, people who were affiliated with the family. And I just thought, my God, what is Montanas and her family going through? It is not justice. The justice system, the legal system failed this family and failed our community. And what we did as a community not long ago, just a few weeks ago, sat down with the district attorney and asked her and said, do you think justice was served in this case? And of course, she has to be careful on her wording because she's an elected leader. But she said, Brooke Jenkins as a person does not feel like justice was served. And she explained, you can't control a jury. There might be biases with the judge. There are factors that should have been in evidence that never got into play. You couldn't talk about his age. How could you not talk about his age? Things like that. There are so many examples. And this is why we must continue these conversations and these fights, because who is to say other killers are not going to be out on the streets doing the same thing? Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you for sharing that and for covering the story in the way. By the way, again, I'm going to keep promoting this book every possible way. You actually go into quite a lot of detail about this, and there was so many moments that we're not going to be able to cover today. But like talking about what I think is courage and how do we really step into it as part of uncovering stories like this, and how do we share stories like this? Because I think that as bystanders, it's easy to look at it from a distance and think there are people who are courageous and then there are people who are not. And we might think that, oh, I'm just not that kind of person. But what we're seeing is that courage is that choice to step into the action because it necessitates it. That's at least my read. I'm curious, what is your definition of courage?
Courage does not have to be you grabbing a megaphone and starting a rally. Courage doesn't mean being a reporter and digging for stories. Courage for me can be having a conversation with your child. I can't tell you how many adults, parents of young children came up to me during this period of time and continue to do it and say, how do I have this conversation? Because I don't know where to begin. And I think it's as easy as surfacing a story from your own past. Your vulnerability is your strength. I know you've heard this before, but I am a firm believer in it. And that takes courage too.
Yeah.
I was not comfortable necessarily talking about my past and how I grew up, when I first started being on TV, but I realized that it helps set you apart. It also helps people relate and wants to make others share stories about their own challenges in their younger years. So I would say courage can come in many different forms, and courage also, on the other hand, is amplifying the good. And it is celebrating the things that are in our community that are phenomenal. And that's a lot of what I do today, too, is trying to showcase the hidden gems, the people, the places that don't get enough recognition in mainstream media.
Oh, I love that. And by the way, I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about what you're focusing on right now and what you're working on, because that's very exciting as well. But you brought up a really good point on the term of vulnerability. And I just want to point out, there's a whole chapter 6 of your book dives into the topic of mental health, which is not something that I personally was expecting to read in a book called Amplify, My Fight for Asian America. But I thought it was one of the most powerful chapters because I think it did cover a lot more work. I was wondering, in your own words, can you share a little bit more about that chapter and what it meant for you?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I want to start off by saying that my mother told me when I was young that if I wanted to seek a psychology, session, if I wanted to, my mother told me if I wanted to see a therapist, that means I'm a crazy person. So that gives you a sense of how I was brought up and trained. I know there are other people who probably had similar, yes, bingo. and she also told me that I was not allowed to cry except when she died. I mean, that's kind of traumatic in itself, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's a lot of conditionality. That's a lot of conditions. You can only be sad for me. Not to suggest that your mom is, but that, right? That is the level of harm it must take to just have a very human reaction. Sorry, please continue.
That's it. No. So I already came into this not understanding the need to take care of your mental health. So when the pandemic hit, it was fast, it was furious. I mean, imagine not just seeking out stories, but being bombarded with them, whether it come from an email or a text or a DM over Instagram, and not just recounting of a story, but very graphic images, bloodied faces, stories about being stabbed. I mean, to show this over and over and over again and to intake it, it is secondary trauma. And I did not discover this until much later. I just, similar to what you said, kept on going. I wanted to put my nose down, my head clean, keep myself out of trouble and just do the work. But at the same time, I felt like one day things were going to crack and slip and I was going to lose it. And I did. And it just happened to happen on live TV. It was so embarrassing because the cardinal rule is you're not supposed to be showing this type of weakness or emotion, especially as a newscaster. And it was a case of a young man who was shot and killed, and he was on his evening walk, and his family had not spoken out about this situation for over a year. They kept this bottled up for a year. And what got me, as I was watching the video back, getting ready for the newscast, was this mother sobbing. She had a mask on. She pulled down her shirt and revealed a heart monitor, one of those, I'm not sure what you call it. And she said, "Look, my heart is broken and I wish that it was me who was killed instead of my son." And it was like you could hear a pin drop. Like I get goosebumps right now, even recounting this story, because his family members were gathered around the table. And all I could think of was, my God, they probably have not dealt with their issues surrounding his death. So, my God, this is traumatic in so many levels. And I'm making her unearth all of these feelings.
Right.
And I just lost it on TV. And I knew that there was a problem. But even then, and somebody came over to me to give me the number of the employee assistance line where I could get some counseling. I still didn't go for months because I was so in that zone of it is wrong to do. Let me just forge ahead. All these people kept telling me, Dion, we need you for the marathon. This is not a sprint, but it did not matter to me because all that mattered was just the burning in my brain, seeing this family hurting and knowing that their issues were not unresolved. And there were probably so many. And who else was going to champion their voice? I don't know. Oh,
Oof.
God.
I'm feeling that just sitting here as you're describing it.
Yeah.
There's in your book, and there's so many parts that I've highlighted, but one of the part that I highlighted was when you talked about the feeling of being isolated. And how interesting it was that, you know, you're in a community surrounded by all of these other people who are like you. You're seen by millions. People send you. I love that somebody sent you a Kit Kat, like a box of Kit Kats. And it's an interesting thing because I think that as Asian Americans, many of us, I don't think this is a new experience for many of us, where we feel like we have a very public self. That is likable and well received, and yet we kind of go back home and, you know, sitting in our beds at night, there's a feeling of isolation, and because it's our private self that we don't always get to share. And I'm curious, you know, when you were talking about that experience, did you ever find yourself coming out of that?
I remember thinking to myself that I needed to put on the best face, be as forward-facing as possible, and to be social because that's what the world was seeing.
Yeah.
I'm still saying yes to participating in events. I was being engaging. I was plugging in. But at the end of the day, I would go home. I would take a bath. I think I took a bath every single day because it was my way of decompressing and being alone and not having to be on all the time. And I think not having somebody to talk to about what it was like covering these stories, not understanding the trauma. Because look, I love my husband. We've been together for almost 20 years and he is Greek. So he doesn't have the same lens. And yes, he cared about what I was going through, the pain, but could not relate because he had not felt that same type of prejudice, that same type of pressure. And you know, sometimes I'll admit it. Sometimes there's a little bit of resentment, right? I'm jealous because you don't have that burden that you have to bear. And I also didn't want to unload everything on him. I remember leaning on a lot of Asian American journalists and just picking their brains, maybe not talking about hate, but the defining moment for me when I stopped feeling so alone was when I reached out to a reporter at our sister station in New York. And he is this tall, 6-foot-something Korean guy. He has, you know, talk about shoving microphones in people's faces. I mean, he is hard-nosed as can be. Like, don't mess with him. He is so good at what he does. And I remember he told me flat out within the first 5 minutes that he also had a breakdown in the middle of CBS. He was just started to bawl. And I was like, whoa, you feel the same way too? And that unlocked something for me. That made me realize that I was not alone. We just were not physically together. We were far apart. There were not many of us, but we were all hurting in some way, shape or form. So by me sharing more of the pain, more people came forward to say, I'm hurting too. And that gave me a lot of comfort. But I don't know if this answers your question because it's complicated and there were so many things going on. But I felt a little bit like a fraud because here I was supposedly surrounded by people all the time. I had audience of millions in one shape or another, but yet I went home and I didn't have anybody to talk to.
The answer was perfect. Yeah. I was, no, it really was. late further on in your book, you talk about meeting someone named Jimmy Hua at an event, and you were talking, and he was sharing about this, these like experiences of what it means. He's the founder of Asian Leaders Alliance, and he says most of us are lonely. It may be one or two of us doing this work in our organizations. Now we have a community of people from 900 companies doing the work. And oftentimes when I get this privilege to sit in front of leaders like you, who have books like these, who have messages and missions like yours, there is such a energy, and I feel so grateful that there's a community of us, even though it can feel so alone.
Yeah.
I'm curious just if you want to offer this to anyone who is in the audience who feels alone in their battle right now, whatever battle they're fighting. What would you say to them?
You really aren't alone. I know it feels like that. It's super hard to put yourself out there. But now with the internet, there are all kinds of groups. And even though these groups at work are under attack, these ERGs, and maybe they're dwindling or smaller or not being funded the same way, they're there, they exist. Look, if you are somebody who is in a remote part of the country, I remember there was a journalist from, was it Tennessee or Kentucky or one of those states where he didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to get people interested. Where was his community? And I remember thinking, you have to start it. You've got to do something. I'll give you an example. During the pandemic, there was a case where store owners in Oakland's Chinatown were being attacked at a tremendous rate. And it was the most unexpected. A contractor whose daughter was a food influencer, I think, said this was not right. What could we do? So on his own, he decided to raise money and buy air horns and give the merchants air horns. I was like, that's so smart. And then a year later, we saw it play out in action. There was surveillance video of a pregnant shop owner who used the air horn to call for help when there was somebody about to rob her store. And I just thought, my God, you mobilized a community of people, grassroots style, your neighbors to help you pass them out, different groups in Chinatown, volunteers. I mean, you really aren't alone. And if you don't want to go out in the community, you're not ready for that. I get that. But you can volunteer in other ways, online, helping organize book talks maybe, or having somebody on a podcast. I just want you to know that we exist. And you know what? Sometimes people just randomly reach out to me on social media. Reach out to the people who you think would be great for you to have a conversation with. Go out on a limb, take a risk, take that chance, and you never know what's going to happen. I hope that's a satisfying answer, but I really truly believe in this. Like, you have to seek it out. And sometimes it's in ways that are non-traditional. Sometimes it's the people who you don't expect to want to be there for you who will show up. They just have a different lens and way they see the world.
Beautiful answer. So after writing this book, it's my understanding that there's been a gap after writing this book to publishing, some like 20 months or something like that. What happened after you finished writing this book and, decided to exit out of actually, was it the same time that you were writing this book that you decided to exit out of your career at the time?
Yeah, this is a complicated response. I will say this, that at the heart of what I do, what I believe in is storytelling and authenticity. And I had a very fruitful partnership doing just that for so many years on mainstream television news in the local capacity. At the time that this book was to come out, I realized that the media landscape had shifted tremendously. What constituted news on a nightly basis was very different from the format of how I wanted to tell stories in this book. And I knew that if I wanted to use that authenticity, that it would take me stepping away and doing something really scary and probably not be able to be a mainstream journalist anymore. And now I know that was okay. Now I know that was the biggest blessing, but it was the most terrifying leap of my life because I didn't quite know how this was all going to shape out. But I knew that this book and that our stories were worth fighting for. And the way that I would have to do that would be to go out on my own.
Wow. This I feel like is really relevant for so many people, so many of our listeners, because it is a common fear that we have when we have something that's safe. And I mean, that's not even given your incredible background as a multi-Emmy Award winning journalist. I mean, you've been on so many of these things, like you were a top voice at that point. But yet, oftentimes, I feel like with Asian Americans, there's a feeling of like, oh, I've done the right thing. I've done the thing that I'm expected to do. And I feel like now it's time for me. For those particular people, what would you tell them, having been through this yourself?
You forget how many skills you truly have and how big your network truly is. Because I just thought I would leave, oh gosh, maybe I would have to take a PR job or a comms job at a tech company. But in my heart of hearts, what happened was unfortunately, my husband was diagnosed with leukemia, which was really scary. And that gave me a wake-up call. He's going to be okay, though. So thank God. Yeah. Trust me. It was a big sigh of relief when we figured it all out. Yeah. But that forced me to really dig in deep. Do I want to go back into a corporate setting again where maybe I won't be afforded the freedoms that I could making it on my own? And I also thought, well, I've been doing storytelling, writing packages and reading the news. How is that going to translate to anything of value? I really questioned that for a long time. And it required me being shameless in asking. It was described to me that I have harbored so much goodwill over the years, emceeing programs, reporting and advocating for our community, that it was okay to ask for things. And I literally would ask for, can you give me interview coaching? Can you tell me what my skills are? Can we do a one-on-one? I was shameless in this. And ultimately, it led me to what I'm doing now, which has actually been more enjoyable in many ways than what I was doing before, because I have the flexibility, the autonomy to tell the stories that I want. In a nutshell, I am the spokesperson and chief strategist for a foundation that helps nonprofits that started from the pandemic. Yes. And give them skills so that way they know how to fundraise, they know how to do their taxes, they know how to seek assistance in the community so that way they can rise and become the next great leaders of our communities. And then at the same time, I'm able to, and this is similar to what you do in your wheelhouse, I spent so many years speaking and presenting and keynoting that I thought, why can't I make a go at trying to help others achieve their goals in a workplace setting? Because similar to you, I am shocked at how many leaders are not leaders of color, because it's not the people who are everyday employees, it's those who are making the decisions that really count. Because if the people who are making the decisions were perhaps Asian American, then maybe all of these stories would be out in the public much more easily, amplified for everyone. So I'm able to now use all of those storytelling skills on social media. People want help with that too. And it's been fun. It is something I never dreamed about doing. I didn't think it was something I could do, but the community is really what helped me understand that I could do it, and then helped me along the way with all the nitty gritty, like Excel spreadsheet. I have no idea what that is. Never used one before.
Nobody knows. I'm fully convinced it is a lie that Microsoft made up to trick us into thinking we need it.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you so much, Dion. This has been such a privilege. If you were listening, go check out Amplify, My Fight for Asian America, coming out with Third State Books. It is when was the pub date again? Sorry, just remind me.
Yeah, the publication is May 12th.
May 12th. Okay, perfect. So definitely go pick this up. And how do people, if they want to find out more about you and what you're currently doing, where do they find you and follow you?
Yeah, please find me. I'm on all social media channels as Dion Lim TV, and I plan to do a book tour across the country and also internationally with events all over the place. So I hope to see everybody there. This has been such a pleasure. You are beyond awesome. Maybe we can go on tour together at some point.
Let's do it. Yes, and come to Vancouver if you're on tour. I'm going to take you out to dim sum. This is going to be a blast.
Done. I'm taking you up on it. Watch out.
100%. Thank you so much for listening. Dion Lim, once again, check out her book, Once again, every single week, we get a chance to talk to Asian American leaders, troublemakers like Dion, to really redefine what it means for our community, for our future. If something that Dion shared with you today was inspirational, helpful, something that made you light up, or just you want to share, make sure to find one person in your contact list and send this episode to them. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I hope to get a chat with you again soon.
We will. I'll hold you to it. See you, John.